Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Dr. Janus Adams. She is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, historian, entrepreneur, and best-selling author of 11 books. It is our great pleasure to honor her and celebrate her. She's also got an incredible book entitled Sister Days, 365 Inspired Moments in African American Women's History. Dr. Janus, it is just a great privilege and a pleasure to have you here this morning. You are doing so many things, but I want to start with the radio show and how it was born all those many years ago.
Wow. I actually began in television and then had the opportunity to launch my own radio show, which I did, first for Pacifica, and then my husband and I were brought to the University of Massachusetts for an amazing little period of time. The University of Massachusetts was launching its Black Studies department, and they asked 5 practicing artists, and my husband was one of those 5. My husband was the musician Max Roach, the drummer percussionist, and so he was one of those 5, and while we were there, they were really moving forward on their radio project, and they had an NPR radio station there, and they knew that I had been in television and radio, and they asked if I would do a show, and I got to pioneer women's programming, issue-oriented women's programming, and obviously doing it from an African-American sensibility, but it was for all women. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that happened was that my 100th show when I was there was with a woman named Helen Gahagan Douglas. Nixon, when he was running for Congress, she was the woman he smeared as his pink lady as they were pushing that McCarthy-era agenda. She was my 100th show, and I got interested in what had been done to her. She actually had on a pink dress in the era of black and white television, and he seized upon her pink dress to make her a pinko. So many of the things that we're hearing today, you know, we hear this push to say communism or socialism is the boogeyman for everything, and that's what was happening then. But we got a little bit of payback because our area in upstate New York had more people on Nixon's enemies list than any place else in the country. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I got to co-host the Nixon Watergate hearings.
Wow. And so what was that experience like?
Well, you know, on one level, you say it's all those years ago. On the other level, and tragically, that history is coming back in full force. Mm-hmm. That need to smear other people, that lack of an agenda that is anything but the kind of agenda that's rooted in our worst instincts as a country, mm-hmm. all of our isms. And that's what Nixon was doing. Mm-hmm. But he was a man with personal problems, as our former president is a man with personal problems. And so that's what you saw coming through. You saw the dynamic of those who at first really wanted to stay behind their front runner, and those who said, no, there's a principle here. And what was that different then than what we're going through now in the wake of the former president's presidency and January 6th and his insistence that he won an election that he did not win, and he knows he did not win it, but it is a marketing campaign for him. And so in the wake of all of that, I mean, we're seeing these kinds of attitudes come back, and we're seeing these kinds of threats and endangerment. So it becomes not history, it becomes current events, and that's the dangerous part of what we're going through now and what we went through then.
Mm-hmm. And on this journey of building, not only in television but in radio, and having such stayability. How does that happen over time?
Oh my goodness, that is an interesting question, because you never do it. You never know while you're doing it. What you're doing is putting one foot in front of the other every day. You get up in the morning and say, I'm not going to let those sons of a gun turn me, stop me. And what can I do today? What can I do next? That's what it's about, and you don't know that you're about to hit your 50th anniversary until you hit it. In fact, when somebody tells you you hit it, you say, what? Me? So that's what it feels like, and that's the shock of having gotten there. But it is also about, I've been deeply privileged to have as friends and sister friends and sister mother friends, people who did it too. I really credit Toni Morrison for so much in my life. She became a dear friend early on, but she kept telling me that I should write. And she introduced me to Ida Lewis, who was then the first launching editor-in-chief of Essence magazine, who gave me my first assignment. I was a graduate student who was privileged to because the school I went to for graduate school, Mills College in Oakland, California, was right across the bay from Oakland, where the campaign for Black Studies was in full fervor. In fact, it was leading the agenda. And right up the road in Berkeley was the anti-war demonstrations. I got to earn, because of the policy of independent studies, the first graduate degree in Black Studies in the country.
Wow.
And through that, I just happened to be at an event in New York, and I met Maya Angelou, and she was intrigued that, number one, I was in her old stomping ground of San Francisco area and all of that, but also with the degree that I was taking and what that would mean. And we were friends until the day she died. And so, I think that's how you get through. And that's why I do what I do now in terms of trying to pass that on to other women, other sister friends.
We were just having a conversation, and one of my favorite quotes is comparison being the thief of joy. And I'm sure men probably have this too, but I think on a greater level, women compare themselves to each other all the time. And I think as a gender, we're not moving ahead at the pace that we could be, because not enough of us are reaching back and helping the other. And when I hear you talk about your sister friends and your sister mothers and being able to come together and give what one needed, or, to help each other, I'm wondering what we can say in the premise of this conversation to impress upon all of us that we're stronger and better and more powerful when we help each other.
I think it's a matter of being very, very diligent on who we choose to listen to. Because what's coming at us every day, there's a whole lot of trash that comes at us. There's a whole lot of negativity. There is a whole lot of insanity that is projected, and you have to create some kind of a filter so you can hear those people who have something positive to offer you. If you're mired in the muck, you got to know it at some point and say no to it, so that that joy can come through. You know, as I say, I just happened to be at this event where Maya Angelou was a young writer, older than me for sure, but you know, in her trajectory, she was just getting started. And I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was just about to come out. That's how long ago we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So she was really starting her path as a writer. She had done other things before, but as a writer. Mm-hmm. And here she was, a young writer, reaching out to someone who was younger than she was. But she was just starting. And she shared that enthusiasm, that joy, and we built each other every day. I remember she was going to the White House one day because she was getting the Presidential Medal. It wasn't just going to the White House. She was getting the Presidential Medal. And I was calling her, you know, about that. And I said, oh, okay, look, let's cut to the chase. What are you wearing? You know?
What are you wearing?
And she actually told me what she was going to be wearing. And that was our conversation. Because we knew what this was about. We knew that this was on point, but it was about that two-way sister friendship, mm-hmm. Of just admiring each other, loving each other, you know, and sharing with each other. And then there is a phrase, right now I've forgotten which of our sister elders said it, but it's when and where I enter, the race enters with me. Mm. And so that what are you wearing wasn't just about what are you wearing to go to the Obama White House to be awarded a Medal of Freedom. And it wasn't just that for him either. Mm-hmm. For both of them, we had really conscious people mm-hmm. who knew that when and where they enter, the race enters with them. Mm. And therefore, what they had to do when they got there, how they had to show up.
Right. You know, it's ironic that you would mention that moment because I had the opportunity to speak to Dr. Angelou before she died, and she told me about that moment, being at the White House and getting this award. And she said, well, you know, I have COPD, and I, was having problems breathing, and she had her oxygen. And she said, I had to leave the building before the president. And she said she wrote them a handwritten letter apologizing for this, what would seem maybe a faux pas. And she talked about how gracious that they had both been to her and how Mrs. Obama had taken the time to write her back and to tell her that this was not an issue at all, that she completely understood. But when you talk about graciousness, that, you know, she would take so much time and just share some of these stories with us in that moment was just mm-hmm. phenomenal.
She was a phenomenal woman who had been through a lot. You know, we have to remember, and I do actually, I talk about it in my books, but to remember, to remind young women that she was a teenage single mother mm-hmm. who decided to give her son the best possible life she could and to give herself the best possible life. And her mother helped her with that. She went through so much, and she was able to share so much with us, and she was able to bring so much to us because of that wealth. The other thing is that this when and where I enter, the race enters with me. I'm talking about Maya. Maya's grandmother, who raised her, is a woman who would have seen what it meant for people to just be coming out of the era of enslavement. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. That's a whole different sensibility. in terms of what we do to keep each other on track and to survive. Last year, we were talking about the centennial of the Tulsa massacre, and we needed to talk about that. However, the thing that I always objected to is that this commemoration was the commemoration of what demonic white people had done in slaughtering other people.
Right.
That's what it was. However, we were not also talking about the story of what it took to build Black Wall Street. And yes, they came in, and it was such an extraordinary story of what these people fresh out of enslavement had created for themselves and built this area, Greenwood section of Tulsa, that became known as Black Wall Street. And it was so strong that people with no sense of imagination, all they could think to do was to tear it down and to firebomb it and all of that. But we have to talk about, we have to hold up what Black people did to create Black Wall Street.
Right.
And that we did not stop doing it after they did that.
Yes.
We never stopped.
And to that point, we had the granddaughter, her grandmother lived through Black Wall Street and was the reporter that reported on all of the stories that happened during the time of tearing what proud people built for years and years and years, just being torn down. And so we do try to share those stories, and that's why I thought it was so intriguing that you had written Sister Days, because it's not until Black History Month or some month that we go back in history and we really try to find what happened. Who were those hidden figures? It wasn't until Hidden Figures that we understood that there were so many PhDs and so many mathematicians, and that there were women who were responsible for history being made. And so you really have chronicled that in Sister Days. Why did you decide to do it?
Well, you know, when I write, I usually try to write from a point of healing so that I can get through the process. And I look at history not as the story of the past, but the story of our present, because it's about those values that we hold up to get us through every day, each and every day. And that's where the format for Sister Days came about, that I would write an essay for every day of the year and one extra for leap year. But that, so that it was about each and every day, something to fuel us each and every day in the present. And what the past provides us is the proof that it's possible. So that's what this book is about. It's actually the third in a series. The first one that I did was called Glory Days, and it was kind of a panoramic 3,000-year history of African America, yes, but the diaspora. And because our history does not begin with 1619, with a horrific crime against humanity. That's not where our history begins. And so I looked at that in Glory Days. Then the second book I did in the series, and these will be back in print by the end of the year, but the second book that I did in the series was called Freedom Days. And that was the story of the extended civil rights era and the impact of the civil rights movement here and the movement globally to get rid of the atrocity of colonization throughout the continent and the Caribbean. So that's what that book looked at. which is definitely a book of saying, this is possible. Mm-hmm. This is what we did. They will keep trying. Wrong thinking people will keep trying, but this is what we know how to do. And then the third one came along, Sister Days, because I had made sure that I looked at women throughout those previous two books, but basically the story of our history and everybody else's history has totally devalued women. And I didn't want to make women part of the story. I wanted to make women front and center in the story. And the one other point that I want to make about Sister Days and the other books is that there are actually three indexes. Mm-hmm. One is, okay, you want to look up Maya Angelou, just look up Maya Angelou. But the second index is a subject index. Look up television, look up broadcasting. But the third index goes to the subtitle of the book, 365 Inspired Moments in African American Women's History. And the third index is an index of inspirational themes. So that if you just say to yourself,
what do I need today?
What do I need today? You go to that inspirational theme index and you find celebrations, culture. No, I'm reading from the wrong one. Ambition, ancestors, aspirations, assumptions, attitude, audacity, authenticity, awakenings, and that's just A.
And that's just A.
That's just A.
So as you're writing about these incredible women, what does it do for you? Is it cathartic for you?
Yes, it does become that. It is not easy when I'm doing it, because our history of the last 403 years has been so forged. It's not about, but it has been so forged with tragedy, with horror, that in order to do these books, I have to embed myself in that and then shed it to look for our agency. Okay, we know what happened, but what did we do? How did we come through it? So that's where I find the inspiration and the empowerment. Yes, we're forged in steel, but at the same point, we have a story to tell about what we did to make a way out of no way each and every day. And in that, it's cathartic, it's healing, it's empowering, it's life-saving. Saving your righteous mind. It's all of that, and it's joy. And then it becomes even more joyful when you get to pass it on and to see what it's doing for other people.
Wow. And so when you go into this mode, how do you choose those women that you will chronicle for those 366 days?
In terms of sheer process, I usually start by just doing a panoramic research. And I know for Sister Days, there were about 1,200 entries that I came up with that I then whittled down to the 366. And that's for content, that's for the ability to have a range, to be able to have that kind of just the A's in terms of the inspirational and aspirational. It takes that many to then say, let's separate the wheat from the chaff and, just center on that. So it is a process. And then I want to make sure that we have the accuracy and the authenticity so that these dates really do correspond to real dates. And I think it becomes so much more real when this particular, I just opened the book, and it's about Alberta Hunter singing at Carnegie Hall. But it says Tuesday, June 27th, 1978. That's real, as opposed to Alberta Hunter did a concert at Carnegie Hall
right.
in 1978.
And you know what? I love to hear you read. I think you're probably one of the best readers that there are. It's something about when you read, the words just come to life. When did you know that was a gift, or you got to know that it is?
Well, you mentioned what we as women know and what we don't know. And I've been fortunate to have people around me who say, you can do this, you're supposed to do this. But I've also had those voices around me that say, who do you think you are to think you could? I mean, you and I are both brown-skinned women. Going to ABC Network and having them tell me, literally, if you were 5'9" and blonde, I would have hired you in a minute.
Wow.
And that kind of thing. So you go through those voices, but gradually something cuts through. And you say, I can do this. I'd like to do this. If I might, I'd love to read from the book.
Absolutely. Please do.
Okay. I'm going to read from the introduction. In the beginning, the story is told, this is how things came to be. The who was who and what was what between man and woman. What the gods had given man, the gods had given woman. What he had in knowledge, she had too. What he had in strength, she had too. Everything was even, for that was God's plan. Then one day the two got into a terrible row. Maybe it was that snake in the grass thing again when the gods called man to account and he blamed woman for tempting him with her apple pie. Maybe it was something like that. But whatever it was, it went on so long that man walked out, slammed the garden gate, and headed up to heaven to have a talk with God. There's got to be a way to put an end to all this commotion, man said to himself. And all the while he's walking, he's talking to himself. He's remembering the good times when he, man, was in charge of everything, and woman was just a rib. Well, by the time he got to heaven, he knew what he wanted. Man walked right up to the God's council and stated his case. He said, God, I've got a woman down there. He said, God grant me strength to deal with that woman. And God did. He knew what was going on. He had given equally to both, but there was something about that woman creature that made all that creating and sun rising and moon making a whole lot of fun. But business was business. With his extra strength, man could also better tend the fields and the flock. So it was done. And man was ecstatic. He raced home to tell woman that he was boss now. And with his strength, he was king. Roar. Well, As you can imagine, woman was having none of that. Night and day, she said, day and night I work my fingers to the bone, and he's the one gets the strength. No, 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 no. Time for a talk with God. And wasn't her God a woman? Well, out the garden gate she sped, and up to heaven she went, just like that. Before she knew it, she was there, for we know, once a woman makes up her mind to do a thing, the thing gets done. She had heard that just before she got to heaven, she could freshen up a bit at the pearly gates. So she would stop off to do that, shake the dust off her feet out of respect. Well, there at the gates, she spied a set of golden keys, exquisite in construct, stunning in simplicity, ageless in design. But this was no time to admire the decor. At Heaven's Gate, she turned right and found the gods waiting for her. From what man had said, they knew she would come around in her own time, and she did. Now, God, she said, with all you've given me, I hate to trouble you, but whatever that was you gave my man, you need to give him a little less. But the God said no, a gift is a gift. You don't take it back. They could give her more strength too, but keeping man and woman even in all things, it just hadn't worked out according to plan. So she thought, and they thought. So you spied the keys, then she remembered the keys at the gate. So you spied the keys to the kingdom, they smiled, all knowing. She could have them as she liked. They knew greater wisdom was a gift she would use well. So thankful she said her praises and rushed home to man. He had his strengths for sure, but she had greater wisdom. And that's why things are the way they are to this day. Man holds up his end for sure, but woman holds the power. So it was told by our mothers' mothers, and so it is to this day true. Women hold the keys to the kingdom, and in her wisdom, the great mother has passed on her stories. From them, our herstory has come. Come, 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 let me tell you a story I would hear my grandmother need. My grandmother, come, 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 let me tell you a story I would hear my grandmother call when I seemed in need of a little soothing down. And that is how I began to learn our history.
Wow. So powerful. Dr. Adams, there's just not enough good adjectives to describe all that you are. And, I said this to Dr. Angelou in our conversation, you're still becoming, even with all of the accolades and success, still growing, still becoming. What's next for you?
Oh, what's next for me? Well, I'm finally writing, and thank you so much. I mean, that was a lovely thing to say. And she herself told me what my next thing is. I was going through one of those moments, and she said, write it. Write your story, then you'll understand. And it's taken me since her death to figure out how to do that. But I am now writing my story. I'm now writing a memoir. So that's important. That's my next thing. And the other next thing that I'm doing, which the full announcements haven't been made yet, it will come along this summer. But I decided that what we need as a people is an institute for history and healing. And so we are fully incorporated. We have a board. We are beginning to work with partners on launching this, and the official launch will be made in the summer, but an Institute for History and Healing. I think our country needs it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you've got to come back when you write your memoir, just anytime, and just share your nuggets of wisdom and just great information. I think you're just really a historian. You know, when I look at your work and read many of the things that you've written, it just really educates us, not just for African American women, but for history. This is a part of our history, and for that, we're grateful.
And I am grateful to you for inviting me to join you today. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Before you got to go, give people your website and how they can connect with not only Sister Day's 365 inspired moments in African American women's history, but the other books.
For all things Janus Adams, my show, the books, my children's series, which we haven't discussed, janusadams.com, JANUS Adams, ADAMS.com is my website.
Indeed. We've got lots more to talk about, so you got to come back.
Thank you so much, Carlette. I would love to.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this.